So welcome back, everybody. We continue today in the middle of the first chapter where we left off last week, and I just want to mention that probably worthwhile to mention even before we begin today. We concluded the Likutei Amarim. We spoke about it, celebrated the Siyum, if you will. We began this new, very unique segment of Shayichet B'Emunah. The segment doesn't have many chapters; it's 12 chapters. But in this chapters, we're zeicha, we're merited to literally appreciate a gift like no other in the world, in the context of Achdus Hashem. We celebrate Achdus Hashem all the time. The oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, identify with Hashem Echad on a constant basis, for that matter. We're obligated to say the Shema Yisrael twice a day, and we say it again before davening and by Krishma Shalamito. So we all identify with the message of Hashem Echad. The Shayichet B'Emunah is a revolutionary entry into the experience of Hashem Echad like no other. Now, I don't want to take the time today because we did speak about it in the previous class when we began with this segment of Shayichet B'Emunah. As we spoke then in the Tanya in general, there's the 5 segments. So Shayichet B'Emunah being the second, and we spoke about it, and it's worthwhile, maybe even, it's a click away really, to just tune in. It was casual, nothing really formal, but it was just to tune into this which we have spoken about in the previous chapter, as we began with commencing this segment, and particularly if you're a newcomer to this week's class, two things. First of all, perhaps maybe even to listen to the last week's class to appreciate the flow of today. Again, it's the middle of the first chapter, but besides that, maybe just to tune into that, which we were able to take a few moments to describe the great, enormous gift, I would even call it, which was handed to us, this ability to enter into the experience, not only know about it, sing the song of Achdus Hashem, but literally enter into the world of Achdus Hashem. So click away the TanyaOnline.com. You might see another site or sites, but if you see it in the other site, there's also the link of the original website, which the only advantage is that you can follow with the text, was the text comes up on a separate scroll bar, as we mentioned time and again. So I'm mentioning it again, namely for the newcomers, TanyaOnline, .com, TanyaOnline.com. And again, the advantage that you could follow the class with the independent scroll bar as you follow the text accordingly. And the advantage that you could tap into all the previous classes. Again, last week's class, Shayichet B'Emunah, and all the previous classes of the Likutei Amarim. They come up in the same fashion also, which is again easy to follow. And so this will immediately go on, V'zeu she'amar Arizal, which is in the original text on page 152, about a quarter off the bottom, V'zeu she'amar Arizal. You could again follow, if you follow along in any with the English text. So it would be again towards pretty much the center, the middle of the first chapter. V'zeu she'amar Arizal. And this is the Arizal noted. Shegam b'deimim mamish k'me'avonim v'ofar mayim yesh b'chinas nefesh v'chayis ruchnis. So what does Arizal write? In the spirit which we learned last week, that even in the inanimate, like stone, earth, or water, because we know again the world general is divided to daimim, tzameach, chai, medaber, which is the daimim is the inanimate, this which doesn't grow, it is, and it contributes a lot to life. Take water, for example. It's an essential, it's a vital element, but nonetheless, it's not something which grows mikatnas lagaz. The way it is, that's the way you come back a few days later, maybe it'll dissipate perhaps, or maybe you would see it less of the quantity of water because it somewhat dissipates into the air, as we know, the nature of water, but it's not something which grows the way. That's the point of it's inanimate. Again, water, earth, stone, and so on. And then you have the botanical world, which is the world of vegetation, basically grows mikatnus legadlus, but namely stays on one place. We're going to do this brief, we spoke about it in the past. And then you have the chai, which not only grows mikatnut legadlut, it means from small to big, similar to the botanical world, but it also moves. It's a whole world, the chai, the animal world. It moves. It has feelings, and it interacts one way or another. It's a different world. We could all appreciate the great difference of the chai, the step from the tzemech to the chai, and then on top of that, there's the medaber. Not only he moves and not only grows mikatnos legadlos, rather, not only it's a whole world of, again, a heart, mind, feelings, and so on, but then on top of that, there's the seichel, intellect, which is associated with the medaber. He's able to talk, interact via formal, constructive speech. And for that matter, they're interrelated. The idea of seichel, intellect, and speech, as we spoke about it as well in the past, and again, it's evident. You need not to elaborate on that. So these four, this is the combination of the entire Olam. If you look around the Olam, you'll find anything in the entire world, on all levels for that matter. But when we speak about the Olam HaMaisa, this physical world, you'll always, everything that you'll encounter in Olam Hazeh, for example, anything you'll encounter, it's all, you could all, shelve it, so to say. It belongs to this, to Daimon, to Tzemeach, to Chaim, Medaber. In other words, you could, it's all, the entire world. When I say the entire world, I mentioned it exists really within, microcosmically as well, within the system of the person. There's Daimon, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber. And then if Shalikis, the Daimon, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber. The Alter Rebbe speaks about it also in other places, which we crossed as well. But generally, it's the daimon. We're talking about the Olam Hazeh. You could always find everything you'll find, or belongs to daimon, the inanimate, or the Tzemeach, or the Chai, or the Medaber. So the Alter Rebbe's chidush over here, as we spoke last week, of explaining this, where the Baal Shem Tov points out the Mechadish B'Tuvi B'Chol Yom Tamim Mas V'Reishis. Basically, the Dvar Hashem Yokum La'elim, or Dvar Chayim Yekayim L'Ma'alad, or particularly the Baal Shem Tov was focusing, similar to the Medrash Tilim, on the Pasiki Dvar La'elim Hashem Dvar Chanitza B'Shamayim. It's not Hashem created the world so many years ago, and then everything just remained that way. But Hashem has to constantly revitalize, revivify creation, and every second, if not, it would turn back to nothing. So that exists not on the level of more sophisticated or complex type of creations, which exist in Olam Hazeh, like the human being. Oh, that's a sophisticated creature, so I gotta maintain him. I gotta make sure that everything is intact because it's too sophisticated. Sophisticated machines. Sometimes you have to have the maintenance of that machine more than anything else, right? You buy a table, for example. You don't really need maintenance because it's a non-sophisticated combination, because maybe it was nicely done, beautiful design, but it's not essentially sophisticated, and therefore it doesn't need to be maintained. Something more sophisticated needs to be maintained, and the more the sophistication, the more the maintenance, the need for maintenance. For that matter, those who provide these, for example, in the context of machinery, those who provide it, it's part of its default that they have a maintenance service, because they know that because it's sophisticated, therefore it could run into trouble. So one would suggest, Hashem has to look after the sophisticated human being, even the animal, for example, because it's a whole world of feelings and mind, and moves around and maneuvers, and it's the world of Chai. It needs to be looked after, and Hashem has to again make sure that everything is okay. But what about the Tzemeach? Maybe Daimim, the stone, created 70,000, almost 6,000 years ago, created, and it's just there. What do you have to maintain the stone? What do you have to deal with the stone? It was created, and that's what it is. No, comes the outcome based on this pasuk. This is what the Medrash Tilim, again, in the Baal Shem Tov, Pirush Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov brought it from a state of information to a state of transformation. We spoke about last week why the Alter Rebbe quotes it from the Baal Shem Tov, Pirush Baal Shem Tov. And that it's all Hashem has to revitalize everything in creation, even the daim, even the inanimate, because if not, it returns to nothing, as no thing at all. And therefore, Hashem, just like before Hashem created the world, there was no stone, there was nothing, there's nothing. And Hashem has to brings something, everything from a state of nothing to something, to a state of existence. Before that, it was a completely non-existent. And the whole process is ex nihilo process. And so too, but it doesn't just stop when, by 6 days of creation, Hashem has to do it on a constant basis. And we explained last week, again, a click away to, as we pointed it out again in detail, this message of La'ilam Hashem Varchanitza Bashamayim. So the Alter Rebbe brings over here, this is what the Arizal writes, that even b'daimim, even in the inanimate, mamash, like stone, earth, water, there is a nefesh, there's a soul, there's a chayus ruchni, there is a spiritual energy which vitalizes that stone, and if it's removed, the stone doesn't just break apart, decay, just completely disappears to a state of nothingness, and therefore Hashem is to constantly bring the stone into existence accordingly, and that's the nefesh what the Arizal is referring to. Stones have a nefesh. Really, yes, that's the message. It has a nefesh which is giving it its life to exist as a stone. Which is what is the energy? That's the energy of Asar Mamaris. That's the same energy of which Hashem created the stone in the onset. It was the Asar Mamaris Nivra Olam. It's the energy of these 10 sayings. Remember, we said also the 10 sayings. This is the Vayemer, the 10 times Vayemer in the Torah. We pointed out is brought again. The Chazal tell us. It's count very carefully. You'll see it's 9 times. The Bereshis Nami Maimeru. The Bereshis is also a saying. It's part of the Asar Mamaris. So this is the sayings all in the first parsha Bereshis. In the first Chumash, in Genesis, Bereshis, and within Bereshis itself, the first Parsha, you have all these different letters and combinations. This is the Asar Mamaris through which Hashem created the world. So in all these letters, there is energy. This is the soul. This energy is the soul of all of creation. The energy which exists in these letters of Torah, of Parshas Bereshis, and this 10 times Vayemer, including Bereshis, that's the soul and the energy which gives chayas and vitalizes and invigorates every single part of creation, including the stone. So when you think about the soul of the stone, that is the energy of the Asar Mamaris, which is Islapshus, Eisis Hadibur, the investment of the Eisis of Hashem's speech, Me'asar Mamaris, from the 10 sayings, Hamachayis and Mahavis Ademim, which give life and give existence to the inanimate. Li'is Yesh Me'ayin, to come about in this ex nihilo fashion, from a state of nothing, Me'ayin ve'efes, from a state of nothingness to a state of Yesh. From that very state of nothingness, the way it was before Hashem created the world. There was nothing. There was no stone. Focus on the stone. There wasn't just a different type of stone, like an odd-looking stone. Before Hashem created the world, there was no stone. So from that state of Ayin Ve'efes, even after Hashem creates the world, it constantly is recreated from that very state of prior to creation, when there was nothing as nothing at all, to a state of Yesh, yes, to be. And again, to be and to be and to be. There's a pump, there's a flow of energy every moment from a state of nothing and to coming into a something. In this case, the stone. That's the nefesh. That's the asis of the Asar Mamaris, the letter, which is the energy, which creates the stone that it's constantly creating, present, constantly creating the stone. That's the soul of the stone. Now, if you look in Parshas Bereshis, that very parsha, one would think that because you're telling me the soul of the stone, which brings the stone into a state of existence on a constant basis, from a state of nothingness to a state of existence on a constant basis, it has its soul. What is its soul? It's the letters of the Asar Mamaris, the 10 sayings, through which Hashem created the world. So the question really is, so you look in Bereshis, you would find probably the word Evan, because those words, that combination of Evan, we spoke about it, I believe, last week as well, because we know that in the Torah, the Lashon HaKodesh, the Lashon HaKodesh in general, which the Torah was written, it's not just any other Lashon, any other language, which usually in the language is called a Lashon Heskemi. Heskemi, something which is made up between the people which are trying to use the language and trying to get things right. There should be communication one to each other. So they established this is called this name, this is called this name, and there should be the flow in the interaction and communication between people. But there's nothing intrinsic with this item with that name. For example, in English, this is called a table, and then you have the chair. There's nothing intrinsic with the name table with the table, or the chair with a chair. It's just, again, we have to know, could you pass me the chair? Someone wants to pass you a table. So you establish that this is the chair and this is a table. But when it comes to Lashon HaKodesh, the words, the names of any object has an intrinsic connection with that object, because that's the source of life. It's not just calling that item with a name in order to us to know what it is, and then how to deal with it, to contribute to our communication for those who speak Lashon HaKodesh. No, this is a different idea completely. In other words, there is an intrinsic connection. For example, the name Even, which is an Aleph, Beis, and Nun, to the stone, because that configuration of Aleph and Beis and Nun has a certain energy, which comes from the Aleph, the Beis, and the Nun. And the Aleph, and not only that, the way, the configuration as well, the Aleph before the Beis, and the Beis before the Nun, and then you have the long Nun, which is the end. That combination is a certain type of energy, which ultimately would, when it manifests, it ends up in the image of a stone. Again, naturally, Hashem has to create, we desire to create, but this is the tool Hashem uses. It says, Hashem spoke creation into being. So when Hashem decides to create a world, and He uses this energy, so this is the energy which would ultimately form the stone, the way that the stone, the image of the stone is, the way the stone looks. With not only looks, the whole makeup of the stone comes from the Even, because again, the Even, those letters and those words are this which creates. That's the soul of the stone. Which is again, it's a diametrically opposite or so distinct difference between the Lashon HaKodesh and any other language, for that matter. So apparently, one would say, look in Parshas Bereshis, find the word stone, because the stone, the Isis, the letters of the Torah, in other words, these letters, this is the soul of the stone. So apparently, Hashem created the world with these 10 sayings, and they're all kind of in Parshas Bereshis. You should be able to find the word stone. And guess what? Look in Parshas Bereshis, you don't find the word stone coming up once. So where is the energy? Where is the soul that creates the stone? Presently creates the stone. And that's what the Alter Rebbe asked. Even the word stone is not mentioned in the Torah. Basar Mamore is again, even though it's not mentioned, the word Even, the 10 sayings in the Torah, which is again in Parshas Bereshis, and you're telling me that this is the source and this is the soul of the stone. That yes, the word Even doesn't say, but the energy of the Even, the way it's interchanged with other letters, does come up in the Torah. And again, you can't directly see it because you don't have that combination of Aleph, Beis, Nun, and that ultimately becomes the source of the stone, and exactly the way the stone is, an inanimate creation. So just to try to make this brief, you say tzirufim, chilufi, esis. Give an example. Alter Rebbe also brings about gematria, and the numerical value of something. Take for example the word baruch, which is usually many times used as an example, even by Chassidus and Kabbalah, which explain this idea. Baruch. What does Baruch mean? Blessed. So when you look at a word, when you look at a paper and it says Baruch, blessed, you feel that message of blessed, something being blessed. Or if your name is Baruch, right away it attracts your eyes, the message, because that's your name. And then the message, it's blessed, right? Baruch means it's blessed or blessed. So so that's the combination of Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf. Not only in the letters Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf, but precisely in that order. The Beis, thereafter the Reish, then the Vav, and then the Chaf, Safit, the long Chaf. What if, for example, if you think about the numerical value of Baruch, right? The numerical value of Baruch, so you have 228, I believe, and then you write another word which has the same numerical value. Does someone say, look at the paper, and he says, oh, what's that? What are those wordings? So you say, oh, those wordings it's about blessing. What's the connection of blessing? But then you take them in a moment, oh, that's 228. There, the message of blessing comes across. The message of blessed comes across. But nonetheless, naturally, in this case, kind of, it's camouflaged. It's not as clear, it's not as transparent. It's not as evident, even though it's there. And so too, you have different, just like you have this this idea of gematria, which is, again, it's according to Torah, you have this idea of gematria. It's not just man-made. This idea has the same numerical value as the other. According to Torah, we find it as well in halacha. The gematria is a way we deal with the matters, even according to Torah, which tells us as well that when you find something which has the same gematria, the same numerical value, it doesn't always work like that, because again, you have to have someone who transmits Torah with the which would tell you about the gematria, or someone comes of the gematria which lives a Torah life, meaning to say he's connected to the spirit and the source of Torah. Not everybody just can make the connection between two things, and because the numerical value is the same. No, it doesn't work like that, because the entire transmission of Torah has to be the one who is anchored into the Holy Spirit and the divine spirit of Torah, which those were the transmitters of Torah, the Tanaim, the Amirayim, and then the subsequent great giants of Torah. So when it comes to any other part of Torah, no one could say, just write something and say, it's in Hebrew, it quoted a Taisvis or something, and therefore it's all holy. No, you have to be someone who is part of those, the part of the spirit, those who transmitted Torah. They lived and they were well anchored in the source of Torah and where Torah comes from. So just like it's anything else, so too, someone who gives over gematria, the connection of the numerical value of two ideas, and shows you the connection, obviously there is validity in their words. Just again, important to note, not everybody summons a gematria, okay, I know it's connected. Has to be a source, has to be a base, but nonetheless, it does ultimately transmit a similar idea. And so too when it comes to words which are interchange. We know that one of the chilufim, one of the ways that one os really is connected to the other, and you find it, for example, the atbash. When you find the tuf, it represents the aleph in a different way, because the aleph is the first letter, the tuf is the last letter, and you go inwards, the aleph, tuf, beis, right? Beis is the second letter, so you have the shin, atbash, the beis, the shin, and so vice versa. And then you have the gimel, the reish, and so on and so forth. So that also, when you have, for example, some of you want to write beis, aleph, beis, gimel as an examples. It's not a word, but theoretically, and then you write shin, tuf, shin, reish, it also represents that, but not that clear. It takes a moment to realize that this is somewhat connected to the aleph, beis, gimel. And so too, there's other ways of communication also. This is halacha, or other ways of the connection and the relationship between different letters. For example, even in Torah we have Leiselach Rachil Bamecha, and this is connected to the word Ragil. It's in the context of gossip, or kind of a frivolous type of talk. We know we're not going to go into the halachas of Leiselach Rachil, and then we find in Tehillim, and even in Torah, but I believe namely in Tehillim, we find the same message with the Gimel, Ragil, Ragil. It's Rachil or Ragil. Which one is it? But what the answer to this is, the Gimel and the Chaf come from the same source. We know there's the 5 instruments which exist within the system of the person. There's lips, his gums, his tooth, his tongue, for example, his throat. There's, from the entire 22 alphabets, it's divided into 5, where the source of these expressions, of these pronunciations of these letters come from. So when you have 2 letters which they come from the same source of pronunciation, they're interchangeable. So the Gimel and the Chaf, say Gimel and say Chaf, you'll realize it's both coming from the throat. So these letters are interchangeable. And other ways that, according to Torah, again, it's not just suggestions. According to Torah, these letters interchange, and therefore, even if you don't find explicitly the letter of the Evan, or the word Evan in the Torah, but it's definitely there. Not with the clear direct connection, or direct wording rather, of Evan, Aleph, Vez, Nun, and in that order, but in other different configurations, there is definitely the word Evan in Parshas Bereshis. Had there not be that message, that energy of Evan in Parshas Bereshis, guess what? There would not be the whole phenomenon of a stone in Elam Hazar. The only reason why there's a stone, because It's the AC is the letters of the Asar Mamaras of the 10 sayings, which is Mahava, Mechayim, Mekayim, which are Mahava, Mechayim, Mekayim, which gives life and existence to that stone. If you don't see the word stone or Aleph Vez Nun in that parsha, you should know it's there, but coming across with different ways and different manners. That's what he says. So he says, Nim Shechais Levin through Tzirufim, Bechilufi Aces through combinations and interchanges of letters. Hamizgalgoles Beralosh Orim, which come across transposed in the 231 gates, Panim Va'acher. And not to go into it now, but if it basically explains there in Sefer Yetzirah brought elsewhere. It says Kamish Kasav Sefer Yetzirah brought elsewhere as well that every the letters, when you combine the letters of, for example, Aleph and Beis, and then Beis back to Aleph, and if you do that in all the 22 letters, it comes to the number of 462. But because when you deal with the letters, if, for example, Aleph Beis Aleph, you're dealing with the same letters, so in the end it's half of the 462, which ends up to be 231. You could look there and you can see where he's coming from. But basically, because of this the different combinations of letters in these different ways, in these different manners, in the end of the day, you do have the energy of the stone, which ultimately would be the chayas, that energy and the soul of that stone, which exists, and the only reason why it exists, not only it existed in the time of creation, the 6 days of creation, when Hashem created the stone, or that day when Hashem created the stone, but it constantly vitalizes this soul, and this energy coming from those very aces, those very letters, constantly vitalize and give chayas to that stone, in order this stone should exist. Till again it evolves from the 10 sayings, and you have that configuration, or that combination of the word Eben, of stone, and that is the life and energy of the stone. And so too in all of creation, every single created being that Hashem created in this world, the names that they're called in Lashon HaKodesh, in the holy tongue, and the holy language of Lashon HaKodesh, that these are the letters of the speech which evolved from one letter to the other from the 10 sayings in the Torah. So you look at every created being in the entire Olam Hazeh, which has a name, and again, as we mentioned, Lashon HaKodesh is not a Lashon Heskemi, something which is just established that we should be able to interact and communicate, but there's again an intrinsic connection between that word and the name which it's called to that created being. Now you look in the Torah and you say, I just saw something, and I know it exists because I saw it, and I know it has a name, and I know the name of it in Lashon HaKodesh, but I look in the Torah and I say, I don't see that word, so where's the life, where's the energy, where's the soul of that created being? And it says irrelevant if you see that. Now, there's certain ideas, for example, eights, we find in the Torah in Asar Mamaris, or Behema, or Chaya, but even there, we still need this combination of letters and energy, because every bird has its own name, and not every name of every bird is itemized in Parshas Bereshis. Yes, they were created then. The entire world was created. All the details and all the different types of birds, and each bird in Lashon HaKodesh has its own name. So generally you have the Oif, you have the Behema, which is again the family, the species of bird. And you have Behema and you have Chaya. But every Chaya and every Oif has a name. Every bird, every animal, every Behema, every Chaya has a name. And then for that matter, to point out, this also, we can appreciate the famous Medrash. It says that Hashem gathered all of creation and brought it in front of Adam. And Adam gave these names to this animal. Hashem asked the Malach and the angel, please give the names to creations, for example, to the animals. And the Malachim didn't really know how, so Hashem turned to Adam, and Hashem says, could you give the name to these different species, or to the different types of animals? And Adam Arishan looked at the Shayr and says, this makes sense that it should be called Shayr, and he gave the name Shayr. And this is known to be called a Kevesh, and this may be called Aiz, which is the sheep and the goat. And the question is really, what's so complicated? What is it, just to have more time in his hands, Adam Arishan, to establish the holy tongue, the Lashon HaKodesh? which remains till today, that the shayr is called the shayr and the keves is called the sheva, the ox and the cow and the sheep and the goat. He just had more time in his hands. The malachim were too busy. What was so complicated to give names to creation, or all to Hashem's all created beings? And the Medrash tells us the malachim couldn't do it because what, they were busy, and Adam Rishon wasn't so busy. That's not the message. The message is, again, based on everything we learn over here, because Lashon HaKodesh is the holy tongue is not just a language which allows us to communicate, yet nothing intrinsic with the name, with the object or with the item. By Lashon HaKodesh, it's not so. There is an intrinsic connection between the word and the name. This created being is called with the Lashon, with the language, and now we can understand Adam Rishon's not only brilliance, but his connection to the source of creation, that he was able to see the flow of energy coming. For example, when he called, he says, this makes sense to be called a sher, to be called an ox. He saw the energy in the letter of shin, and he saw the letter and energy in the letter of vav, and in the energy in the letter of resh. And on top of that, the combination of this shayr and that particular configuration of the vav after the shin and the resh after the vav, and the energy which exists, the way the letters are set up precisely in that order, that establishes a certain energy. And he saw the connection with that energy to the actual ox. And therefore it says that Adam Rishon was beyond, even stood higher than the malachim. It's brought in a number of places, because he was associated with an neshama. Neshamas are higher than malachim. In other words, Adam Rishon was about the neshama, the soul, and neshamas are higher than malachim. And therefore, when Hashem asked the malachim to do so, and malachim said, we can't, it's not because they were busy, it's because they weren't able to see or make the connection between the actual animal to the actual energy of that animal. Or again, any other part of creation. But in this case, for example, the shayr, Adam Rishon was able, because Adam Rishon was able to detect the ices, or the energy in the ices, decode them, and to see the code behind them, the energy behind them, and their direct connection to the shayr, to the makeup, the exact makeup of the shayr. And so too when it came to keves, and so too when it came to any other animal, if it's a bird, or the specific names that birds are given, the specific types of animals, and so on. Because this is what Lashon HaKodesh is. It's an energy which gives off that life, or it's an energy which ultimately brings life and existence into that creation based on the name which this created being is called. That was the Chochmah of Adam Rishon. He saw the life force which exists in this combination, in that particular configuration, which is ultimately would be the source, the exact source, the exact symmetry of energy, which ultimately would give life to for example, the shayr, the whole makeup of the shayr. That's the way it's able to exist, with that exact makeup, that exact combination, exactly the nature of the ox, the power of the ox, the strength of the ox, the ability of the ox, the entire makeup of the ox, and the way and which ends up looking, functioning, and conducting itself with all the details, which are thousands and millions of details, which combine anything of creation, and particularly anything so lively and so productive like an ox. He saw all the energy in that word shin vav resh, and exactly in that configuration. Therefore, he said la zed la na'ali krasher, and so too any other part of creation, which is again tells us that every single thing, every single idea, every single matter, every single part of creation, every created being, the way it exists, which is with its particular function, its particular style, its particular makeup, all come from those 10 sayings in the Torah. And if you don't find the 10 sayings, if you don't find that exactly combination, that configuration with those exact letters in the Asar Mamaris, which is ultimately in Parshas Bereshis, the first part of Parshas Bereshis, it's because the words were interchanged. If it's gematria, which is again the numerology, which the same message comes across, but again a little bit more camouflaged, doesn't have that transparent message. Again, in the same, when we spoke about in the same example, we said Baruch. When you see the word Baruch, there's nothing else than blessing when you have to find it behind the numerical value, it kind of compromises on its clarity, and it's very transparent in its transparency, but nonetheless it exists. And so too, if you have Beis, let's say you want to say Beis, Reish, Vav, Ches, let's say in the Atbash interchanging manner, for example, interchange type of Tziruf combination. So you have, for example, Baruch would be the Reish first, the Shin first, Atbash, the Shin first, and then you would have the Gimel, and so on. So you look at it and you say, oh, it's Baruch. But it takes a second. It takes maybe a few seconds, but the message is still there, because all these combinations are, again, predicated in Torah itself. And this is the way Hashem created the world, that He established certain letters and words in Torah. And these words, and again, the words that Hashem established, He felt that that created being need to have something in Torah with its exact wording. And other created beings, Hashem established that it's going to be there in Torah, but nonetheless it wouldn't be direct from the 24 letters, or it wouldn't be direct again with its original name, that you have to find it. It exists in the Chilufim Utmures Haisis, in other words, the letters, the way they interchange. In the different ways, again, letters interchange, all based on Torah's emes. But they're all in Asar Mamoris. They're all in the 10 sayings. They're all in the beginning of Parshas Bereshis. That's the soul and that's the energy of these letters. So this is what he says, that Lashon Hein Einei Sadi Ben Mishtalshus Madrega Madrega, which evolve from one level to another, from the 10 sayings in the Torah, through the letters, the way they change, and again, the exchange or interchange of these very letters, the way they're brought and the way they're associated with the 231 gates, which we mentioned before, brought from Sefer Yetzirah, till they reach and they invest in that very created being, to give it life and existence. The Rebbe says, why did they wish to do it in that fashion? Because, and he says there's a reason for this, because just like we just mentioned, for example, back to the example of Baruch, because you want to point out the message of Baruch just the way it is, in its most clear, transparent manner, you just write the word Beis Reish Vav Chaf in that very order. Someone was looking for blessing, or someone has gravitated to the message of blessing, or someone needs blessing, or someone's called Baruch, it's all there. You want to give across the same message with less potency, which means a bit more camouflage, so you write in a different way. So the message is the same, but nonetheless, it's not as clear, it's not as transparent. So too, Hashem felt certain created beings, I cannot write the words the way they're called in the Torah itself, because then the message, the energy would be too strong, too potent, and ultimately that would reflect in the way that it would not be created in the fashion that they were created, because I, Hashem, wanted them to be created in that particular fashion, that particular style. And I just wrote their name in the Torah, and the energy would be too strong, again, too strong, with too much overt energy, and by the time it reached, or when it would reach rather, this item, it would not look like the way it was meant to look like, the way I decided. For example, Hashem would write Even in the Torah based on this understanding over here. The energy from the word Even, when it would reach the stone, or want to create the stone, or would create the stone wouldn't look like the stone the way it looks today, or the way it looked in the 6 days of creation, which this is what Hashem had in mind. For whatever reason Hashem wanted part of His creation, there should be a stone as part of His creation. There should be a stone as well. And because the word Evan, if it would be written in the Torah, would be too strong. Again, similar to, we say, Baruch, the way it's written, Beis Reish Vav Chav, then you have the whole message with its full potency of blessing, as opposed to when you have the same message in a way that it's a bit camouflaged. So you do have, and you do reach the same conclusion, that you're trying to transmit the message of blessing, but now it's not that potent. So the message is minimized because it was transmitted through another means of transmission. If it's gematria, something the same numerical value, or these letters, which again, according to Torah, they interchange. And so too, Hashem felt that if you write the word Evan in Torah, so then it would be too strong, too overt, and that the potency of that message, because Torah is the molecular energy of all of creation. Torah is Hashem, and Hashem is infinite, so there exists a certain infinite energy in the Torah, and therefore the same Asar Mamoris generally have the ability to create. How does the like the Rebbe would conclude this page? How does the Asar Mamoris, because they're written in Torah, have the koyach to create? Because the Torah is Ein Sof. Hu v'chochma seyechad. Hashem and His Torah are essentially one. Hashem and His wisdom are one. Torah is Hashem's essential wisdom, so it carries the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, it's able to create an entire world with all the complexities and the sophistication of Olam, which we still never have reached with all that we know about Olam today. In particular, we still did not probably scratch the tip of the iceberg of how much there exists in the creation. Well, that's powerful. These words created, that's the soul and that's the source of creation of this entire sophisticated world? Yes, because these Asar Mamars are in Torah, so they carry the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So because you're dealing with infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's say if the Evan again would be written in Torah, it would be too strong, too potent to ultimately create the stone the way it looks like a stone, an inanimate stone. Now we can say the rules, okay, so why does it say that in creation, which created something not as sophisticated? Why that, for example, the eights, it's more sophisticated than the stone, it belongs to the botanical world, grows and so on. Yes, we do find the of eights and Elon and so on, but it's not in our understanding. We're not the one who said what is more sophisticated or less sophisticated, where Hashem felt that He had to put that word itself as part of the Asar Mamoris as it is, or exchange that word or that message with these other means of exchange. It's Hashem decided, because Hashem knows the codes behind and the energy behind every word, and where He felt that it would be too strong in order to create this which Hashem had in mind to create. Exactly in the same makeup and the same style. In this case, Hashem felt the Evan, if I would write Evan in the Torah, there would not be the actual stone the way the stone appears in creation. So Hashem took the same energy of the Evan and put it through other combinations. But the Evan exists, because if it wouldn't exist, the stone would not exist. That's what he says. So it's Atzma Godel Ma'ed, the chayas which come from the word Evan itself is too strong, too potent. From the Nivarim HaPratim, from these detailed created beings. And they don't have the ability to accept that energy, and again, to be created in that particular form and style, only when that chayas comes from Torah. The chayas of the Evan. Yes, the chayas of the Evan comes from Torah, but it evolves from one level to another. Level pchusa mimeno, and again, in a way that it's camouflaged. It's less through the interchanging and then the exchanging of these letters. You see that Rebbe says clearly through the whole world of numerology, which are cheshbon isis, which these are the numbers, the calculations and the mathematical calculations of these isis. Right? We know that, for example, Beis is 2 and Gimel is 3 and Kuf is 100 and Reish is 200 and so on, which is again the world of numerology. And in the end of the day, when you find the Even, the word Even, for example, which ultimately gives chayas, vitalizes the stone, you should know that Even is sourced in Torah, but it came through different challenges or different combinations rather, and different interchanging energy from Torah, which ended up in the word Even, Aleph, Vez, Nun, the Vez after the Aleph and the Nun after the Vez, which gives the chayas to the Even, creates the stone exactly in the image and the format and the appearance and the function of the stone, if you will. And that's what gives it chayas then, what created it from nothing to something, ex nihilo, in the time of creation. And that is the soul which gives it chayas up till this very moment. And then he says, so the Even in the end does have the source, and that's Sarmamoris, that Yuchali Samson, that Shein Cheshbonais, actually Yuchali Samson, till it could become completely contracted and condensed. In other words, this energy comes from the Torah, from the potent energy of Torah, will be slavish, and again, in ultimately, because of this contraction, it could invest and to be created this particular created being. And that's its name, what is given Lashon HaKodesh. Which is the word, for example, in this case, the word Evan. It doesn't say the word Evan in the Torah, but it comes from the Asara, the energy of the Asara Maris, and eventually ended up in that word Evan, which ultimately creates a stone exactly in the fashion of the way the stone appears. And the stone right now becomes a keli, the stone becomes the container to that perfect the energy which was meant to enter into that stone, which is again a condensed version of the Isis of Hashem's Asarim Amoris, so the stone becomes a container to that energy, which is again the energy which is mitzumtzum, which has been contracted from the enormous energy in the Torah, and again configured in the exact same way, contracted and condensed in order to enter into the stone. So the stone, the physicality of the stone, becomes the container to which that energy enters. It becomes the perfect container. So there's this synthesis between the energy now and the stone. The stone becomes the container to that perfect measurement of energy, which starts off in Torah, but again contracted and ultimately condensed, and then ultimately ended up in the word Evan, and that's the Evan, the stone, the physical stone becomes the container for the energy of Evan. Exactly the way the Evan evolves from the energy of the Asarim Amoris. Shenishtal Shem Asarim Amor Shebeteira. Sheyesh B'en Koyach V'chayis Livis Yesh Miyayin. Here the Alter Rebbe concludes this chapter that what's in it Asarim Amoris? What's with these Asarim Amoris and Bereshis? Where do they have the Koyach to build such a sophisticated world? For that matter, where do they have the ability to create in the onset? Where do they have the ability to create a stone, which is also a created being of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The letters of Torah? Yes. Torah is Ein Sof. Torah has the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because Torah and Hashem are essentially one. Hashem is infinite. Hashem is the creator. Torah is, again, has that same energy. For that matter, what does the Medrash tell us? The Torah was the blueprints of creation. But we could look at it just externally. Well, Torah was the blueprints of creation because Hashem ultimately wanted that the world should be aligned with Torah. In the end of the day, that Hashem wanted a world should be perfectly aligned with the message of Torah, and therefore Torah was the blueprints of creation. Just like when you have the blueprints, because you look at the entire objective of what you want in this home, in this building, in this edifice, so too Torah is the blueprints of creation, but it's beyond that, because when you say blueprints of creation, Torah is the energy of creation. Hashem created the world with Torah because Torah carries the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because the reason why Torah has the Koyach V'chayis, again, just to conclude exactly these words with the ending of this chapter, the reason why Torah has the Koyach, the energy and the life to create Yesh Mi'ayin, next nihilo, in other words, something from nothing, and to give it life forever, eternally, on a constant basis, is because Torah and Hashem are essentially one. And the Koyach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, exists within Torah. So the Asarim Amoris, which are written in Torah, in Bereshis, they have the Koyach to create. And certain creations directly from the words of the Asarim Amoris.